identify it with someone you've taught who was not a good student or did something horrible. And so names were really hard, and I just couldn't figure out a name. And then 2 weeks later, suddenly my father passed away. And, you know, I kind of look back on that and think, well, that's why I didn't have a name, because I ended up naming my son after my father. And his sudden passing just absolutely took the wind out of my sails. I had no experience with having to deal with anything of any gravity. I mean, I had a pretty easy life and never had to deal with anything difficult. And I was very unprepared because I was expecting my child. I don't know, it was like a double whammy, and I didn't handle it very well, but my mother was, of course, in complete shock, and my brother had just separated from his wife. So as pitiful as I was sort of the one who was lifting everyone up and tending to everyone else's needs during that time.
You know, Sharon, when you say you hadn't been through anything with that kind of gravity, this was the first time in your life that you'd lost somebody that close?
Yes, I had lost, my great-grandmother when I think I was 4 or 5 years old, and I'd lost a pet. And when I was older in junior high, a lady who worked for our family passed away, and that really hit me probably harder than any of the others because I saw her probably 2 or 3 times a week and was much closer to her. My grandfather died, but I wasn't really close to him. And I had a good friend who passed away, and that was hard. But at the same time, it was, it wasn't, I don't want to say, the friend who passed away absolutely tore me up. But when it's your dad and you think that your dad's going to be around for a longer period of time, it absolutely just did me in for a while.
Well, and I think you're touching on something that's kind of important here, and it's that it isn't necessarily the blood relationship we have with somebody that makes them close to us, but
right.
It can be so many other things. And you mentioned you lost a pet. Well, I know from my own experience that because with my dogs, I spend so much time with them. When I lose them, it's a terrible loss.
Right.
And so that's one of those things. But still, though, the way you talked about your dad and the influence he had, the impact he had on your life, and the amount of caring and loving he'd given to you, I don't think it's any small wonder that, as you put it, the wind was taken out of your sails.
Right. He, and the thing was that he, when we look back, we see all these signs. He had shingles 2 weeks prior to his death, and anyway, a lot of things happened that we just, you didn't see till the end. You kind of looked in hindsight and figured it out. But he had a heart attack, and the pain from the shingles on his chest masked that heart attack. So he didn't know, and they were treating him for other things. And it was just a calamity of errors in a way. And it was no one's fault, but everything that could go wrong did. And I had never had to deal with anything, and it was spur of the moment, and I had to be there. And when I got there, I just didn't expect that outcome. I just kept thinking, something's going to change, he'll be all right. And I never got to go in and actually talk to him, see him, or tell him goodbye. And that is what I think my regret was, because 2 weeks prior, I had a feeling the last time I saw him that something was, it just felt strange, and it felt like, gosh, this may be the last time I see him. And I brushed it off and tried not to think about it, but I chose not to tell him I loved him, because I never did that. I thought it was kind of sappy, and he knows it, and I'm not going to say it. And that has been something I truly regret. And I feel like I was given that opportunity because I consciously thought about doing it and chose not to. And I think that sometimes when people lose someone, they find a little guilt or regret because of things like that. So I try to share that with people and tell them, always say what you think. If you have a feeling, you need to go ahead and say it, because you don't know when it might be too late.
I'm visiting this afternoon with Sharon Brown Keith. Sharon is the author of a book entitled Mockingbird Moments. Well, obviously, your father has passed on, and you went through the process of the funeral and all those things, and then the aftermath of the funeral. As you mentioned, Sharon, the wind was knocked out of your sails, literally. And not only that, though, it wasn't just you, your other family members. I mean, this was a terrible shock for everyone. And here you were, even though you were carrying a child, you were in some ways perhaps in better shape than other people, and you found yourself in the role of having to be a caregiver when you needed care. I mean, this had to have just been absolutely overwhelming.
It really was, and I hope, I tried not to sound like a martyr in the book, because people have endured so much worse. People have lost parents and had to watch them suffer or had some tragedy tied with it, and I can remember my dad as healthy and happy. I didn't see that happen to him, but and I didn't want people to feel sorry for me, but I wanted them to know that it's okay to feel like you're alone and to kind of have a little pity party, because it's something that everyone's going to do differently. There's not a timeline for it. There's no way to grieve that's going to be exactly like someone else. And it's not an event. It's a process. And it's something that takes some people a shorter amount of time, some people a longer amount of time. And I just feel like that, I guess me writing the book, that's what I hope that people see, that I don't know how to do it. I still don't know how to do it. I did it differently than most people, or who knows, everyone may do it my way. Who knows? We can't judge how people grieve, and I think sometimes society does expect us to be over things quicker maybe than we are, and that's something that I've struggled with.
Well, Sharon, I can tell you, you're not the only person that's had that struggle, because I've talked to other authors on this subject, and they've said pretty much the same thing. I can tell you from my own life, I've been through some of that as well, in different situations where I've experienced loss. And then that's one of the things, when you say there's not a timeline for this, that is really, I mean, if you think that you're going to suffer a significant loss like this, and 2 weeks later you're going to be back to normal, or a month later, or
Right.
3 or 4 months later, I got a piece of news for you. Chances are, no, you won't. It's going to depend on the relationship you had with that person.
Exactly. And one of the points that I make is that, and it took me a very long time to realize this, because I thought, well, there's something wrong with me, that this is still so fresh and raw, I mean, after decades. And what I realize is that great grief comes from great love. And so I think that I found a lot of consolation when I realized that, because I know I love my father so deeply, and so I'm thankful for that. If I had gotten over this and hadn't thought about him, what a tragedy that would be, not to have had the kind of father that I had, that I loved so much. So, as you said, it just depends on the relationship you have with the person.
Tell me about how you began, because obviously, I mean, this is a day-by-day thing you're living through now. Tell me about how you began the process of starting to heal yourself.
And when you read the book, you discover I just had no clue, and it was, just different things happened. I went back to work, and a week after my dad died, and my principal called me in and said, the best thing you could do is move on. And I was expecting this, I am so sorry, I'm here for you, and it wasn't that at all. And I learned real quickly, life goes on. People think that you need to move on and focus on other things, and you just can't do that. So I learned early how to play a little game, and I would go to work, and I would be a different person. I would be okay, and I would, act like that I had it all together. And then I would go home, and it would be completely different. I was sad and tired, and, of course, I was expecting a baby. And once I had my child, and then I had 2 young boys to take care of, but I kept thinking, well, this is going to help me. I'm going to name him after Dad, and this is going to help me, and I'm going to get better. And I didn't. And I didn't tell my mom because I didn't want to burden her. She had so many things she was dealing with. And so I just moved on and didn't seek help, because I thought, this is what everyone feels. I'm not that special. I don't need to talk to anyone. And really, those were some bad choices that I made, but I didn't know any better. And in the end, I look back, and I don't deserve a medal or a trophy or any kind of any